is often created. So what does it take? What do, those first generation wealthy folks do? What are their habits that allow them to really build that legacy for themselves and their family? And after going through that call with her and hearing what she had to say, it got me thinking a lot about what are kind of some of the underlying principles behind those habits and behind that growth. And so started thinking and actually ended up digging way back in the vault, going back almost 20 years to my freshman year of college and the couple of economics courses I took back then. Now, some of you may know I ended up going the history route in college, but I actually started as an econ major until I realized about 3 semesters in that to get an econ degree required you to take calculus, and that just wasn't going to happen. But I do still love, the principles behind economics, what it represents, and how it can really explain so much of what goes on in our world. So I want to talk about the economics of this business here really quick. And just to kind of give us a baseline, I'd love a little bit of participation here. For anybody who feels comfortable, when you hear the word economics, go ahead and throw in the chat there what comes to mind when you hear economics. What is it? What does it represent? What is kind of your relationship with that word, with that study, with that science? We'll give that a minute here to Paige says the most boring class ever. Sarah and Lisa, both with money. You're not wrong. Zoe with money. Tion, money and taxes. Good. Recognizing that that's a double-edged sword. Tom, getting closer. Net earned and spending power. Love that. Paige with the supply and demand. James with supply and demand. Yeah, there we go. Now we're getting a little bit warmer. So, yeah, right. We all have, Bridget, the relationship between the economy and wages. Good. No, none of this is wrong, right? What are we talking about here? We're talking about resources, right? Now, at its core, economics can be boiled down to 3 main areas of study, right? Number 1 is scarcity, okay? Study of scarcity. What are our resources? In what abundance do they exist, and how do we allocate those? That's number 2, right? How do people actually choose to utilize resources? And then the third main definition that we get from economics is the study of decision making. And that's really what I want to focus on today, is the study of decision making. Are we basing our decisions on data, on fact, on things that can be supported, or are we basing them on emotion? Are we basing them on maybe fear? Are we basing them on sometimes greed, right? So these are questions we always want to ask ourselves. What are the bases of our decisions? Why are we making them in the way we are? Because when you start to question the decisions you make, you start to realize that the economic science, right, the actual science behind it can teach you that you don't always, when you act from emotion, you don't always act in your own best interest. So talking about then, how do we make decisions? One of the things that we want to really focus on is the idea of economic efficiency. Economic efficiency is simply making sure that we are lying on that graph in the optimal use of resources to maximize output and minimize waste, right? And that's with any resource we have. If you have $10 and you go to the store, how much can you get for $10? Well, that's going to depend on how effectively you allocate that resource, right? I go with $10 and I could buy 1 soda, or I could buy 10, depending on where I'm shopping. Am I effectively maximizing the output and minimizing the waste? And we can extrapolate that to all areas of this business. Now, economic efficiency, the term that we're probably all most familiar with, that we hear on the news every day, every week, gets crammed down our throats, right? Especially during an election cycle, is that term GDP, gross domestic product, okay? And that's simply measure of the total value, okay, of goods and services provided or supplied by a country. And we often talk about that in relation to other countries, okay, to determine who's doing the best, who's winning. So if gross domestic product, right, defines a country, then we could say that for each one of us on this call, our gross individual product, right, the total value of the services that we provide could define our level of success in this business. Is that fair? Everybody tracking with me so far? Perfect. So when we're looking at what our gross individual product is, and we're looking at maximizing our output by minimizing our waste, What are a few of the things that we want to focus on? Well, number one is resources, right? What is our biggest resource here? What is the thing that we want to capitalize the most on? Anybody want to take a stab at that? All right. I'm going to go ahead and assume, oh, there we go. Thank you. Thank you, Paige and Tracy. Yes, it is our time. The most scarce resource that any of us possess. We know it is finite. We know it will expire. The most scarce resource that we need to protect is our time because we know that how we spend our time comes with a cost. Now, I remember this from my very first economics lecture. Professor got up there in front. She stood on a pedestal because she was about 4'8", I think, very short lady. But she stood up there and said, and wrote this on the whiteboard, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Anybody familiar with that principle? No such thing as a free lunch. And it's one of the defining principles of economics, right? It means that every decision you make, everything you do comes with a cost. Now, that cost is not always measured in terms of dollars and cents, right? Oftentimes, it's what we refer to as opportunity cost. Opportunity cost simply asks us, what is the value of the next best option that we chose not to make? So, what are some examples of opportunity cost in this business? Well, the first one I can think of is turning on my computer and flipping through MSN rather than checking on pending business. It's watching TV instead of dialing, right? It's getting up to go clean the garage after somebody hangs up on you rather than picking the phone back up and making that next dial. See, every time that we choose a non-income producing activity over those IPAs, right? Those income producing activities, we have paid an opportunity cost in the form of time that we cannot get back, right? Because time and resources are finite. That's the entire principle of scarcity. Time is scarce, time is valuable. The value of that time then is what we place on it and what we choose to do with it. So when you're thinking, right, about your business and you're thinking, I could sit down and dial, but I did that yesterday, right? And I didn't book any appointments. What's the point in doing it again today? You are all of a sudden devaluing your time. You're devaluing the leads you purchased. You're devaluing your relationship with your most precious asset versus somebody like Rafa, right? Who makes sure that he sits down and dials for 3 hours every day. He knows the value of that time. Value of that time for Rafa is 7 applications and $13,000 in premium. He can put a number on it. Why? Because he knows that the time spent is returned to him. So how does symmetry help you, right? Efficiently allocate your time, efficiently allocate your resources? Well, number one comes back to leads, right? So you don't have to spend time prospecting here. You don't have to spend time going out to find clients. You don't have to advertise yourself. You don't have to invest in marketing, anything like that. Symmetry's done all of that for you. So you get right from the beginning more of your time back in the form of leads. Now, I used a word just now, investment. I want to talk about the difference, right, between a cost and an investment. Let's throw this in the chat too. Anybody want to take a stab at the difference between a cost and an investment? I see Ibble getting ready to type. ROI, cost is lost, cost has no return. Exactly. Guys, so cost is simply a spend that's required to maintain the status quo. Some costs in our daily life, right? To keep things the same, well, we got to keep paying our cell phone bill, right? We got to pay the power bill. We got to, pay the rent, pay the mortgage. These are all costs, okay, that keep us exactly where we are. But investments, well, those are outlays that have the potential to, as Susan said here, generate a return, right? ROI, return on investment. So what is the language then that we're using when we go to buy leads? What is the language that we're using when it's time to dial? What is the language we're using when we have to say no to going out on a Friday night, knowing that that's going to enable us to maximize our time on Saturday morning? These are investments that we make because investments have the potential for return. So moving lastly into value, right? Because this is where all of this comes to a crux. What is the value then of our time, of our energy, of our resources? Well, that's completely relative, right, to each individual person. Think about when you were 6 years old, 7 years old, right, young kid, and you got $10 for the first time. Parents handing you $10. Man, you're on top of the world. You were rich. $10? Are you kidding me? How many gumballs can you buy with $10, right? That is a value perception. What you value is relative to your relationship with that resource. And at 7 years old, $10 seems like the world. Now, I could hand Tom $10 today, and I'm sure he would be appreciative of it, but it's not really going to have the same impact, is it? Because over time, our relationship with that resource changes. Over time, we start to see our buying power determined by the things that we desire, right? Those resources that we desire becomes more and more and more limited. So, in that sense, right, a lead then only has the real value once it converts. So, again, going back to efficiency, by increasing conversion, we increase our economic efficiency. We increase the total value of goods and services produced. How do we increase our efficiency with our leads? We work them more often. We work them more consistently. We focus on the opportunity cost of not dialing, and we say that is too high of a price to pay. For our clients, right? What is the opportunity cost for them? How do we help to create that perception of value in our policy? Right? Now, we can sit here, Nibble and I have had this conversation. How often have you looked at a client's situation and said, well, logically, you need this, right? This is something you absolutely need, only to have them go, I don't think so. I don't feel like it. I'm not going to buy it. See, we have to create that perception of value. We have to create for them a reality in which the opportunity cost of letting this slide by is too high of a price to bear. Now, how do you create value in that conversation? Well, it's not by telling them, right? Because remember, in this situation, they're the 7-year-old. Their relationship with this policy is a lot different than ours. Their value perception of the protection we provide is a lot different from ours. So in order to create value in a policy for a client, what do you have to know? You have to know what's important to them. What are they protecting? What do they have an emotional connection to that makes them say the opportunity cost of letting this slide by is too much to bear? And you do that by asking questions and follow-up questions, and then more questions on top of that until they tell you, right, that the cost of this is too high to bear. Tom says, yeah, Paige, I'm just looking in the chat. So many gumballs. Love it. And Tom says connection for sure is the key. And that's it, guys. See, we make decisions based on economics all the time, but we often coat them in the guise of emotion. Excuse me. I got that backwards. We make emotional decisions all the time that we often coat in the guise of economics. We don't think about what the true costs are and what we are giving up in order to get what we want. So to wrap this up and to kind of bring things to a close, when we look at our business here, it's a choice, right? Every day you have a series of choices that you have to make about how you allocate the resources that are available to you, your time, your leads, your dollars. And in order to see a return on that investment of time, of leads, of dollars, requires us to consider each choice in turn. Do I dial one more? Do I dial two more? Do I make it to the top of the hour? Right? Because remember, no such thing as a free lunch. You are going to have to sacrifice time. You are going to have to invest. You are going to have to utilize resources in order to be successful here. But the more you increase your efficiency, the more you build that muscle, the better you become at producing the results, the bigger return you see for that investment. So, guys, with that, we are getting right about to the half-hour mark. Want to give an opportunity for anybody to chime in with anything as we wrap up. Paige, Tom, Bridget.
I think it's excellent reminder, Hunter, of the core values of how to look at this as our business, right? And to your point about the emotion, this what we do, what we help people with, it is an emotional decision it's backed up by logic. So figuring out, what's important to them, where do they need to invest their monies, their time. I think it's a great just drilled down core principle of what we do, which is help people see that this can help them, and then we make sure it makes sense for them in their budget. So great job. I loved it.
Thank you, thank you. Well, guys, awesome to have you all here this morning. Thank you so much for jumping in. A special welcome to Team Felix. Look forward to working with you guys more and more in the future. But everybody have a great Monday. We will see you. Oh, we will see you tomorrow morning on the accountability call, right? What is that? 9 a.m. Eastern time, ready to start breaking down some numbers, right? Creating some true accountability within this team. So look forward to seeing everybody on there, and we will talk to you all soon.